because this is the beginning of the year, I want to start off at the beginning of how a lot of our diseases started and why most of us are in the position that we're in, listening to our doctors, and listening to dietitians and food experts. They're all governed by the government, and they all have to follow the food pyramid, the dietary guidelines that come out every 5 years. So the last one that came out was 2020. The one before that was 2015, 2010 before that. So the next one that'll come out will be 2025. So every 5 years, they have so-called scientists and other people, meaning food industry people and other people that are interested in selling food products that make up what the food pyramid is going to be, and the ones that the doctors advise for us to utilize for a healthy diet. So what happened was, Jovi, if you could put up the first screen, please. Back in the 50s, a lot of guys in their mid 40s, early 50s were having heart attacks, and they were having a lot of heart disease. So the government got involved in trying to figure out what was going on. So there was a prominent doctor back then. His name was Dr. Ansel Keys. And he came up with a theory that it was saturated fat and cholesterol that was doing this. And doing the research and everything, what happens is when your arterial walls get damaged, what happens is that has to be repaired, and what repairs that is cholesterol. So cholesterol goes inside your arteries and patches that hole of the damage that was done to the arterial wall until it heals. But what happens is if you keep damaging the arterial wall through your diet, that more and more cholesterol has to go inside and start patching up those holes, sort of like you put putty on a wall to cover up a crack and then you paint over it. That's what cholesterol does. It covers up the crack and it heals it for the arterial wall to go back to being healthy again. But as you keep deteriorating your arterial walls, more and more cholesterol goes in there, and then it starts causing calcification. And that's what leads us to hardening of the arteries on the inside. It's called atherosclerosis, and that's what leads to heart attacks and strokes. So Dr. Ansel Keys said it was cholesterol and saturated fat that was doing this. And as I explained, when things damage our arterial walls, cholesterol goes in there to repair it. Because of that, Dr. Ansel Keys at the time was very prominent, and he was affiliated with a lot of governmental agencies. So he had the government believe that it was the heart attacks were due to cholesterol and saturated fat. And that's when Jovi, are we getting to the first graph?
Yeah, let me get it. Hold on. It wasn't letting me upload it. And that one's for the obesity, right?
The first one, the obesity one, right?
Mm-hmm.
So everything was fine up until Dr. Ansel Keys came in and said that it was saturated fat that was doing this. Then the U.S. dietary guidelines was established in 1977. And once the graph comes up, we'll be able to see exactly what happened. Okay. Okay. Can everybody see this, the graph? Mm-hmm. Okay. So if we're looking at the red line, you can see from 1960 to 1980, it's pretty flat. It goes up gradually, I agree, but it's pretty flat for those 20 years. And all of a sudden in 1980, it jacks up all the way to 2002. Then it goes up even further than that. So that's when Dr. Ansel Keys came in and told the government that it's saturated fat, that we need to start going on a low-fat diet. And then that's when obesity started. So what happens is that there's three things that our bodies crave. They crave fat, sugar, and salt. So if you get rid of the fat, because Dr. Ansel Keys told us that we need to go on a low-fat diet, we need to make up for flavor. So the food industry is like, what can we use to bring in more flavor so that people keep buying our product? That's when he started putting in sugar and refined carbohydrates, sugar alcohols, substitute sugars, and sugar substitutes like What are all those equal? Artificial sweeteners. That's what
Aspartame,
aspartame, right? So
saccharin.
no, thanks. I was in a lost words there for a second. So that's when all this stuff started coming in. So we can see that it wasn't the fat, because our fat content was consistent all the way through all the years, all the way up to 1977, when the government urged for us to go onto a low-fat diet. So it's not the fat that's causing that, it's the carbohydrates that are causing this. So what's happening here is that the carbohydrates, the sugars, and the refined carbohydrates and breads and pastries and all that stuff, what happens is that those sugars and everything are like sandpaper, and they rub against, on the inside of your arteries and your blood, they rub against the arterial wall and they scratch it, and they start tearing it. So now cholesterol has to go in there and repair those tears, and so the arterial wall starts healing itself again. And as you keep eating those refined carbohydrates and sugars over and over again, you keep scratching the inside of your arterial walls and keep causing more and more cholesterol to build up in there. So if we get rid of the root cause, what's causing the heart attacks and the strokes, which is refined carbohydrates that are tearing up the arterial walls, then we can get rid of or drastically reduce the heart attacks and the strokes. So we need to, it's not the fat that's causing the problem, it's the sugars, like refined carbohydrates. A lot of people, and I've been in this industry for 25 years now, people are still phobic of fat. They think that fat makes you fat. Fat does not make you fat. It's the sugar. It's the refined carbohydrates. It's the alcohol that has a lot of sugar in it. So these are the things that are causing the obesity problems, not the fat, which is why the ketogenic diet works so well with diabetics and people who are trying to lose weight, because your body is using that fat. We've got 75 trillion cells that make up our bodies. And each one of those cells needs saturated fat and cholesterol to form that cell and keep its structure. So we need the fat. Our brains are 65% of our brain is omega-6 fatty acids. That's what our brains are made of, 60% of it. Fats give you a good complexion. Fats are needed for to produce hormones, to produce testosterone for guys. We need fats for a lot of things, just to keep your body healthy. Our bodies need fats. Plus, it's a major, major energy source. It's got 9 calories. It's got twice as many calories per gram, or twice as many grams per calorie as protein or carbohydrates. So there's a lot more energy we can get by eating more fat, and we can go a longer period of time of not feeling hungry if we eat more fat and less carbohydrates. And that's a different talk that I'll give about the macronutrient distribution of what makes us hungry very quickly and what makes us feel satiated for a longer period of time. Okay, the blue line up on top, you can see it says overweight. The blue line, people have been remaining overweight constantly throughout the last 60 years, 70 years. It's not the overweight people that are causing a problem, it's obesity. Obesity is skyrocketing. If you go on to the next frame, please, Jovi. Mm-hmm. What's interesting here, most people don't believe here, is the fact that if you look at this, you see the difference. It's males and females. We've got the overweight males in the green line, the overweight women, and go back and forth. So the interesting thing